My father, Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, he started his journey, his political journey, since the 1970s, calling for freedom, calling for the compatibility between Islam and democracy.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the show, Brother Mouadh and Brother Ahmed. Thank you for coming to International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies. It's a great honor to have both of you on this show. Inshallah, we'll discuss a few topics of interest regarding Muslims, the Muslim world, and particularly, of course, Tunisia, where you come from. I would like to start with you, Brother Mouadh. Perhaps we can just get a little bit of background as to the current political situation in Tunisia. Bearing in mind that, of course, Tunisia has got a very remarkable development in terms of politics after the start of the revolution way back in 2011. And I think it was Tunisia which started the ball rolling in the Arab world. So can I have a few words from you?
Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
In Malaysia and here at the International Institute. Tunisia, as many people know, has started the Arab Spring. This ignited, a wave of revolutions in 2011. And these revolutions were the outcome of a long years of struggling for freedom, for democracy, for dignity, because most of the Arab world, not most actually, all the Arab world was run for the last decades since the 50s by dictatorial regimes. And these dictatorial regimes, they haven't been able to produce economic prosperity. They haven't been able to provide their citizens with the ability to live under the rule of law. And that's why when this system wasn't able to deliver the minimum that can satisfy the people, the people's anger, was growing and growing until it reached a point where it exploded. And the ignition started in Tunisia, and that is spread like wildfire, in Libya, in Egypt, in Syria, Yemen, and even the other countries that didn't experience the revolution. Still, there was some kind of social movements that were calling for reform. And the people wanted, basically, the main call is that الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. The people want the collapse of this regime that has
dictatorships.
Has imposed its will on the people, has made the people subjects, not citizens. So the people wanted the collapse, the bringing down of the...
Can I interrupt a bit, because you were talking about this, but of course in the context of Tunisia particularly, I think being the son of course, a great leader of the Islamic movement, Ennahda in Tunisia, Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi. So you being the son, you would have seen how your father was in the forefront of this movement to bring about change, particularly in Tunisia. Can you elaborate a little bit on your father's role in the change of government in Tunisia?
My father, Sheikh Rached Ghannouchi, he started his journey, his political journey, since the 1970s, calling for freedom, calling for the compatibility between Islam and democracy, calling for some values like citizenship, calling for the principle that Islam is fit to provide answers for the problems that we are facing in this day and age. So this process started in the 70s. So it's a reform, is kind of part of the school of reform within our Islamic tradition that wanted to give a new ijtihad to the understanding of Islam, try to make it relevant to today, and at the same time facing persecution and asking, struggling for freedom and for democracy.
Yes.
And this long journey culminated in the 2011 revolution in Tunisia, when the people went out to the streets and said no to the dictator.
Yes.
Back then it was President Ben Ali.
Yeah.
And after 3 weeks of protesting in the streets, the dictator Ben Ali, he fled the country. My father and myself, with the rest of the family, we were living in exile in the UK. So we went back after the revolution. And Ennahda Party then in the first free and fair elections in the history of Tunisia.
Yeah.
Tunisia became independent in 1956.
Yes.
But the first free and fair elections in 2011.
Yes.
So in these the first free and fair elections, Ennahda Party won. The majority was the first party, won 41%. And it was a historic moment in our people's history.
Yeah.
And after that, obviously, this what happened in Tunisia gave hope that change, peaceful change, is possible. There's the slogan, "Yes, we can." It's a kind of cliche, but actually,
Yes.
Arab youth, they started believing that they can change their situation
Yes.
to the better through peacefully protesting and through peaceful means. And that's why we saw, as I said earlier, this wave spread
To other
Egypt
other
very quickly,
yes.
Libya, and to the rest of the Arab world.
Brother Ahmed, following on what has been mentioned by Mouadh just now, Islam and democracy, the compatibility, because we noticed that, of course, we started, I think, the Islamic movement and the aspirations of the Muslims would be towards the movements and the parties that wanted to establish some kind of an Islamic rule, or not to say a caliphate in that sense, but a kind of a state where Islam would be in power, whatever that may mean. But how would you elaborate the compatibility between democracy and Islam, given that, of course, we have groups which take a very extreme, no, you can't have democracy. Democracy is a Western, idea, a theory, and it is against Islam and things like that. Can you give us some pointers on that?
Well, democracy is not part of Islam as such. It is a human, if you could say, ijtihad, a solution which the Western civilization mainly has developed as a solution for their conflicts. That is dealing with power and conflict in peaceful ways, and power shift in peaceful ways, and allowing people to choose who to govern them. So yes, it's not part of Islam, and actually Islam as a jurisprudence system, as a Sharia, did not speak or dictate how people should be governed. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he died, he did not nominate anyone or tell his Sahaba how should they choose who to govern them after his death. And I don't think that the Prophet has done that, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed the Prophet to do that by mistake, or no.
Yeah.
It's part of what the ulama called al-mubah. Al-mubah is part
Permissible.
of ijtihad.
Yeah. Permissible.
And most of public affair and private affair are part of the permissible, actually. They are not part of what is restricted by juristic rules. So the question in regard to compatibility between democracy and Islam, in my view, it's non-Islamic, meaning that it is part of the permissible. So unless there is a ruling in our fiqh and jurisprudence which says that this is haram, we should accept it. Fuqaha said al-aslu fil ashya al-ibaha. I mean, the principle in dealing with things that they are permissible. And many of the Muslim scholars have sought in democracy a good way to implement the will of people and the concept of aqd in ummah, the social contract in ummah, which is not new. The concept of social contract in ummah is old. If you go back to most of our ulama, such as Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, Ibn Taymiyyah, they all speak about aqd. The relationship between the ruler and the ruled is based on aqd, on a contract. And democracy actually is a type of contract. So for us and for Sheikh Rached, it was not a question whether there is a need to speak about compatibility. Yes, many Islamists, many Muslims thought that there is no compatibility, and Sheikh Rached defended this idea. But no, democracy works for us. And our problem was really is to have the right as Muslims to participate in public affair based on our Islamic perception. This was our fight.
That's interesting, and I think
going along what Brother Ahmed said about compatibility between Islam and democracy. In Islam, in the Quran, Allah tells His Prophet, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. So the affairs of the Muslims, how do we decide around them? How do we reach a decision? Is it one person imposing their will on everyone else? Or is it, what do we do? So Allah has instructed His Prophet that your affairs, the affairs that bring the community or society, should be decided in consultation. Shura is a principle, it's not a system. How do we turn a principle into a system? I think what is interesting in democracy is that it has tools. It's been translated from a principle of holding those rulers, dealing with differences and reaching a decision despite the differences, gives us a way of doing this, gives us tools, instruments. We choose people who represent the wider society through elections, and then these people discuss amongst them, and then the majority within these people then reach a decision, and they choose, for example, the executive, and they hold them to account. So we found that we can translate our shura, we can equip it with the instruments to make it a real system. And that's why we approach, we get to this compatibility. As Brother Ahmed said, it's something that, al-aslu fil ashya al-ibaha. Why do we say that democracy is haram? Some people say, because the sovereignty in Islam is with Allah, whereas in democracy, the sovereignty is with the people. But that's actually a false way of looking at things.
No, coming to this, can I just a little bit on this thing, because when you talk about this particular competitively, I can understand what it is all about. But there is, in the context of society, when you talk about society, including, I think, also in Tunisia, you have many groups. You have you are the Islamic group, and then you have the so-called secular groups, who don't subscribe to the ideology of Islam or whatever. But when it comes to democracy, that is the case where how are you going to reconcile? Do you include these people as well, the secularists, whoever it may be? Because there are sometimes we find in society, Muslim society or majority Muslim societies, they say that rule must only be in the hands of the Muslims. cannot share power with non-Muslims and so on and so forth. How would you describe that?
I mean, this attitude which considers that in regard to power, that Muslims should monopolize power and they should impose their system of jurisprudence on everybody, it contradicts a direct verse in Quran which says "La ikraha fi din." This verse, as the Mufassirin, the ulama were speaking, it was addressed to the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, whom given their kids to the Jews. And some of those kids became Jewish. So those Sahaba, those Ansar, they tried to bring their kids back to Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told them, no, you don't have the right to coerce your sons to become Muslim like you. لا إكراه في الدين. Sheikh Khidr Hussein, who is the Dean of Al-Azhar, he has a book about Hurriya fi Islam, freedom in Islam. And there is a chapter which speaks about Hurriyat al-Aqidah, but not only Hurriyat al-Aqidah, that within the Islamic system there is what might be called right now the communitarian rule. So let's say I am a Maliki, you are a Shafi'i, so I will go to a Maliki judge while you go to a Shafi'i judge. But let's say Mr. X is Jewish or Christian, is Buddhi, so you don't have the right as a Muslim to oblige your system of law upon him, apart from public affairs, meaning how to do business and so on, which is based on aqd. That's why the ulama, they speak al-aqidatu shari'atul muta'aqid, al-uqudu shari'atul muta'aqidin, that contracts is the sharia of those who are the contractors. So Islam does not go with this perception of what we call modern state, which imposes one system of law upon everybody. This is non-Islamic. The problem is that some modern Muslims are understanding Islam according to the Western way. And they believe that by doing so, they are better presenting Islam, which is not true. These people, they need to change their system of thinking and bind themselves to the heritage of our ummah and of our ulama. So actually, Islam is the best system which incorporates multiplicity of faith, multiplicity of culture, and even multiplicity of system of jurisprudence within and under the authority of Islam. And that is why Islam, for example, people became Muslims here in Malaysia or Indonesia, not thanks to coercion of state, but thanks to the freedom which Muslim is allowing to people. Not only here, all over the world. So it is this freedom which has propagated belief in Islam. And that is why Muslims are defending Islam. Because Islam is allowing them to live free. Those who think that via the authority of the state they are going to implement Islam, they will be deterring Muslims or people from Islam itself.
Yeah. Can I ask you something, Brother Mouadh, regarding now coming back to Tunisia? After the recent developments that had taken place, Tunisia has come back to more or less square one, what you would say, with the arrest of your father, recently, 2 years back. And now you have a situation where the institutions of state, democratic institutions, are more or less under threat and so on. So how do you see the future of Tunisia, the political situation? Do you think it will change? How are the people reacting to this kind of development? Do you have hope for coming back to the dictatorship, quote unquote?
My father always says that a Muslim needs to be hopeful.
Yes.
We need always to believe that the future, inshallah, will be, inshallah, better, inshallah. And as the Prophet ﷺ says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُسْلِمِ أَمْرُهُ كُلُّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. that the Muslim is the only one when there's something, everything is good for the Muslim.
Yes.
Something good happens, then he thanks Allah, and that's better for him. And something that is negative happens to him, then they're patient, they have sabr, and that is, inshallah, they will be rewarded for that.
Yes.
So whatever happens, inshallah, we accept Allah's will, and we work on finding solutions, for the problems that we face. Going back to, what happened in Tunisia, it's all revolutions throughout history. Even if you go back to the French Revolution, they're always followed by a counter-revolution.
Yes.
And this happens for a number of reasons. Revolutions usually, obviously, they're against a regime, but then it's termed the old regime. And also it gives people very high, unrealistic expectations. Then what happens? People, they turn disillusioned a little because their expectations that everything will change suddenly, all the problems will be solved.
Yes.
Because change, we know that is not easy, it's difficult. So people start getting disillusioned, and the elites from the former regime, who the revolution was against them, they managed to get together and do a counter-revolution. In our case, in Tunisia and in Egypt before that, these counter-revolutionary forces, they're not just internal forces, they're also supported externally. Because there's many external forces who are not happy that our countries have freedom, that our countries choose their rulers, they hold them to account, because they know that they don't want independent countries, they want to pillage our wealth, and they want regimes and government that serve
control
the Western interests.
Yes.
They don't want countries, for example, that would call, for example, the freedom of Palestine.
Yes.
We see what's happening to our brothers and sisters,
yes.
In Palestine. Our hearts,
Yes.
Bleed for them and cry for them.
Yes.
Or make
Yes.
dua for them. And we're very inspired by their resilience and their sabr and their strength and their creativity, and their steadfastness in defending their right to be free as people.
Right.
And we see that, who's the siege on Gaza is not just by Israel, it's also by, unfortunately, the Arab neighbors.
Yes.
So the many external forces, they don't want, if the government or the regime in these Arab countries were representative of the will of the people, then the will of the people in the Arab world is to support their brothers and sisters in Palestine.
Yes.
So that's why many different external factors were not happy that there were these Arab revolutions, coupled with the internal also players who wanted to take things back. But as we saw also, as I said, in France and many other places where revolutions took place, after the counter-revolution happens, then again the revolutionary forces, they gather together, they evaluate themselves, they try to avoid the mistakes they've
done before, yes.
And then they go back to regaining freedom, because the people, once they taste freedom,
yes,
they will not go back. They will not accept to go back to dictatorship.
Yes,
and the revolution happened because we reached a stage where we cannot go on like before.
Yeah,
these people who want to take us, back, they will try. Maybe they will have some short-term relative success, but they can't have long-term success.
Yeah.
So in Tunisia, what happened obviously in July 2021 is part of the process that started in Egypt in 2013.
Yes.
Counter-revolutionary forces.
Yes.
We held out, for 10 years despite all the different conspiracies, and then unfortunately in 2021, in the summer of 2021. We had this President Qais Said, who managed to do his coup against democracy.
Yes.
And Sheikh Rached, my father, he's the head of another party, and he's also the Speaker of Tunisian Parliament. Democratically elected
yes.
Parliament. And So the coup was against this parliament, and after the coup, Ennahda and my father decided that what we need to do is we shouldn't do this fight on our own. This fight is not for Ennahda only. This is the Tunisian people's fight for democracy. That is why we shouldn't go into this on our own. We should involve everyone who shares our support.
So how is the situation currently? Will there be an election in a short time to come? And how do you look at the prospects of getting rid of the counter-revolutionaries now?
So, as I said, we because we believe that this is not only our fight, it's a fight for everyone. So that's why we worked on bringing everyone together from different backgrounds, from different ideological tendencies, parties on the left, on the right, conservative parties, liberal parties. We formed a front called the National Salvation Front. This front is there to call for freedom and democracy. It brings together five parties from all across the political spectrum, and also 5 civil society groups. And this together, they're working on bringing back democracy through peaceful means. Obviously, that's
what's the prospect of? You think the other people with you?
I believe myself that you know that the people, they've seen that this dictator who sold them in the beginning, sold them many lies. Oh, like basically we will have like paradise once you know we get rid of this democracy, all problems will be solved. This democracy is messy, too many people having different views and different arguments. No, let's just push all arguments aside and I will solve your problems. But they found that actually after 2 years.
After 2 years,
the country is collapsing.
Yes, the economy is going down.
The economy is collapsing. The basic needs of the Tunisian people, bread, rice, sugar, coffee, they're not there. Shortages. The salaries that public servants, are paid, like teachers, and it gets delayed. People to buy anything, they need to queue up. Power cuts every day, which is something that never happened in the history of Tunisia, modern history of Tunisia. So people can see, actually, this dictatorship isn't delivering for us. Things were much better under democracy. And this is actually in 2 years that actually the speed of how reality people are finding out the reality is alhamdulillah is very good. We have, as you mentioned, we have elections in October 2024. We with our allies in the National Salvation Front, and with others, we're discussing, how to approach this, whether we maybe have a candidate together to challenge this dictator. But regardless, there is consensus across Tunisia that the existing situation is unsustainable, cannot continue, and that this president does not have any answers to the country's problems. There is consensus. Now, what the alternative is, that's where there's a bit of difference, and that's why through dialogue and through working with others, we're trying to reach consensus on the way forward. Yes, we know that the existing, this president, he needs to go because he's actually now the source of the problems. Okay, but what's the alternative? And we're working with others to present and develop a credible alternative to give to the Tunisian people.
Yes. On this note also, I would like to ask Brother Ahmed, considering not just the whole region, Arab world, let's just say the Arab world, and as Brother Mouadh was just saying about the current situation in Palestine, with the war going on, and you can see how resilient and how the Palestinians are confronting the enemy, and they were able to withstand, which no Arab army can do. It was carried out by the Palestinian resistance with such success. But there's another dimension to the politics of Middle East. I mean, for a long time, I think we know that American influence as a superpower practically every Arab country, you could say, was under American influence. But now there are certain changes after the war between the invasion of Russia on Ukraine and changing power shifting here and there. And you can see that China is also beginning to come into the region. You can see that Iran and Saudi Arabia have patched up their relationship. And now we also see that China has moved even more into the Arab world to soft power at play. Do you think that there will be some hope for some change in the Arab world? Because I think under the American influence, the Americans were happy with the status quo. They just wanted all these, the Arab kings and the rulers to remain in power as they were. But do you think that with the Chinese coming in, the situation is going to somewhat change, and perhaps there would be some political change in some of these Arab countries in time to come? What do you think about that?
A revolution, when it happens in one country, it doesn't happen solely because of the conditions within that country.
Okay.
A regime change cannot happen only if the environment, regional environment, and even international environment allows such a regime change. For a dictator to be able to rule as a dictator, he needs also such a context, whether international context or regional context. The same is for democracy. The world is really interlinked to each other. So when you change part of the puzzle, you need to change all the constitutions of that puzzle. So when the Arab Spring happened, it happened also because the process in the geopolitics in the world is changing and is shifting. This process, once it starts, it doesn't stop. And there is no going back. And there is no going back to square one. You either fall into worst case or you are able to progress forward. We are not doing a fight to defend neither the West or the East. We are defending our rights and the right of our people in being free and in choosing who can rule us and in being able to make those who are ruling us accountable. That's why we say we would like to have democracy. So it's about choosing and accountability. We do believe that it is the interest of the West to defend these values and to stand by these values, because it is the region that is portraying these values and saying that we are for liberal democracy or democracy. China is not selling any ideology, it is just selling its interest. We would like, as Muslims or Arab countries, to be open to all the world, as long as it serves the interests of our nations. So this conflict between China and the West to NATO, we are not part of that conflict. We are part of those who would serve the interests of our people. And we do believe that democracy is the system which best suits us and which best suits humanity up to when humanity is able to bring about a better system. We believe that Islam, the values of Islam, can bring about a better and stronger democracy, actually. So what is happening, it is bringing more conflicts within the world. But for us, we would like to if we can, to gain as much as possible for the sake of our people all around the Muslim world, so that our people can choose and can decide for their present and for their future. We are not against the West. We consider that especially the West, which has a Christian heritage, is closer to us, because these are Diyanat al-Tawheed, whether Christian or Jewish. But at the end of the day, it is our duty to defend the interests of our people.
Thank you very much, brothers. We had a very good discussion about this democracy and Islam and the region, especially North Africa and Arab world. It was a great pleasure to have you with us. Both of you from Ennahda, Tunisia. I think the most famous and the most influential party in terms of democracy in Tunisia. We hope you'll come again to Malaysia and we'll have another session. Thank you very much. This has been a very enlightening session from our brothers from Tunisia, Brother Mouadh and Brother Ahmed, have given a very good description about Islam and democracy, especially in practice in the Arab world. And I'm your host, Abdul Latiff Ibrahim, and we sign off